Hello students, this is Professor Russo and I'm back again to talk about interview preparation. And when we looked at Professor Poole's bullet points at page 81 in her textbook, we went over the different suggestions that she had. And one of them I want to focus on right now. If you look up in the corner here, you'll see identifying the purpose of the interview. So let's take a closer look at that. Identifying the purpose of the interview. First of all, quite simply, is it a sexual abuse investigation or is it a physical abuse investigation? And you're going to have a different approach. Physical abuse is more discernible. That is, you can see it more easily. Usually there's injuries. Usually there's a medical doctor who has seen something. There's more evidence almost always in a physical abuse case than in a sexual abuse case. So if it's a physical abuse case, you approach it one way. Most of these cases involve, especially at the district attorney level or the prosecutor's level and the forensic interviewer level, sexual abuse investigations. And of course, sexual abuse investigations are the most difficult and you have to be well prepared. So differentiate. Is it sexual abuse or physical abuse? Was there a prior disclosure? I can't emphasize that enough. I've talked about that over the past few sessions, and also your Sorensen and Snow studies on accidental and purposeful, tentative, active, the kinds of disclosures or how children tell. I think that's the name of the article. So you want to know whether there was a prior disclosure. Did someone talk to that person? Did the child disclose to the guidance counselor? Or did the child disclose to their aunt? Or maybe a playmate, like in the referral or intake form we looked at earlier. You want to know how the child told someone. Who did they tell? What was the context of telling? And if they didn't tell, how was it discovered? How was an accidental discovery made? Again, I bring up the example of mom found a diary or text messaging. Sometimes moms walk in on this stuff. So how did the information get to the authorities is vital. That helps you size up the child. Also, the question is, do we need to send out an investigator? Do we need an investigative response? And let me say this. You almost always need an investigative response. The way to process this, and child protection workers around New Jersey, that is, but certainly around the country probably have the same questions, is how come the police or the prosecutor's office make us go out and do a pre-investigation, especially since we're told not to interview the child and not to ask the child questions because the prosecutor wants us to protect the integrity of the questioning of that child. Well, what Professor Poole calls it a minimal inquiry interview. I call it a look and see and get back interview. I don't recommend them except in cases where it's really, really ambiguous. For example, if a child says, and this is the disclosure information, suppose the child said, "I don't like Grandpa since he moved in our house. He's creepy. He's up in the attic and I hear weird noises. I don't like it. He makes me feel funny." Now, if a child said those kinds of things, that's troubling. I don't know what she doesn't like about Grandpa. Maybe she just doesn't like the fact that he's in the house, that he's taking away attention from her. There's nothing really clear about sexual abuse. The child obviously seems troubled. In that case, what that child offers is ambiguous. It's not that clear. That's the only kind of situation that I would do a minimal inquiry interview, where I'd have the Division of Child Protection and Permanency go out and do a look-see and get back to the prosecutor or the police officers or the law enforcement. Most of these disclosures that are troubling involve something that's more clear-cut. If the child says, "I don't like Grandpa, he moved in the house last month and he's creepy, he's a real perv, he comes in the bathroom when I'm going pee-pee, he touches me in places." Now that's pretty clear, right? That child seems to be a victim, seems to be, if everything she utters is true, a victim of child molestation. We don't need the division to go out or anybody to go out and do a minimal inquiry. We need to follow whatever the protocol is in the community where this investigation takes place and bring that child to a safe place and to be interviewed by a forensic interview specialist. That's what's optimum. That's what's ideal. So Professor Poole talks about this in the context of a minimal inquiry interview. The other thing she says in the team meeting that is before the forensic interview, is there potential for multiple victims? That's important as well. One of the things you have to do is identify who those multiple victims might be. For example, if it's the chess instructor at school who does this during the after-school chess program, well, if he molested one of the children, he may have molested other children. Those children may need to be spoken to. We may need to ask this child if she knows anything about him doing things with other children. So that's a question that the team has to ask themselves ahead of the interview. These are some basic preliminary questions that you need to ask in every case. And the reason that Professor Poole highlights them, and the reason that I'm highlighting them right now in this little mini cast, is they're vital. They're important in every case. They're basic general questions that the team has to ask themselves before every interview, before you can go forward. So identifying the purpose of the interview is vital, and make sure that you appreciate how important that is.